Lesson 13, SIAM Practices Part 2, Processes and Tooling Practices. Welcome to Lesson 13. In this lesson, we'll complete our studies of SIAM practices by looking at integrating processes across service providers, creating a tooling strategy. Remember, these are just examples of some of the practices that have been used in organizations as part of their SIAM model. Your own organization will develop its own practices over time that help it to manage its own SIAM model and the challenges associated with it. Let's start in the area of process practices and think about how to integrate processes across service providers. A process is defined as a documented, repeatable approach to carrying out a series of tasks or activities. Within a SIAM ecosystem, processes span multiple organizations. For example, the incident management process is used to resolve incidents that affect service. The process could span multiple service providers during the diagnosis of the incident, and the service integrator will be involved in incident coordination. Each service provider will usually have its own incident management process, which needs to align with the overall end-to-end process. We're going to study the challenges associated with integrating processes across service providers, and then look at some of the practices that organizations use to address them. Click on Challenges and Practices to learn more. You can see the challenges associated with integrating processes across service providers on screen here. There are a number of different causes here. Some are cultural, some are commercial, and some are related to how processes have been implemented. We're going to use an exercise to look at the practices related to integrating processes across service providers. Plan to spend 20 minutes on this exercise, and don't forget to check out our suggested solution. You can see a reminder of the challenges associated with integrating processes across service providers on screen. What would you recommend to try and improve the situation? Put yourself into the position of the service integrator and make some recommendations. For example, to address manual reporting, you could use some of the practices you learned about for enabling and reporting on end-to-end services. There are 3 practices that can be used to support the integration of processes across service providers, which you can see on screen here. We're going to study them in more detail now, starting with a focus on process outcomes. Organizations don't implement processes for no reason. Each process should have a clearly defined outcome. For example, change management allows changes to take place in a controlled way so that service is not disrupted. The service integrator needs to start from the desired process outcome and then identify the tasks and activities that each service provider needs to carry out to deliver that outcome. The RACI matrices we studied earlier in the course can be a helpful tool here. Once everyone understands their role in the process, there will be less chance of process gaps or tasks being duplicated. Continual process improvement is also a recommended practice within a SIAM ecosystem. The service integrator will have responsibility for an overall process improvement program, working with the service providers to identify improvements to individual process steps and to the overall end-to-end process. Process improvements need to be logged, discussed, and improved if there is justification for them. Once they've been implemented, they need to be measured to make sure they are delivering the planned benefits. The final practice associated with integrating end-to-end processes is to use the process forums we've already studied earlier in the course. You can see some examples of process forum activities on screen. Each process forum will try to incrementally improve the process they are responsible for. One tip to remember for your own organization is that it's easy for proactive work like process forums to get pushed aside due to daily pressures and firefighting. Focusing on proactive work might not be seen as a priority, but in the long term, process improvements can actually reduce the amount of firefighting required. The final practice area we'll study is technology practices, specifically the practices associated with creating a tooling strategy. The tooling strategy outlines the functional and non-functional requirements for the toolset or toolsets that will support the SIAM ecosystem. We'll refer to toolsets in this lesson, but remember, it may be only one tool in use. The toolsets need to support all of the processes, standards, and reporting requirements that have been defined. The full functionality might be available straight away, or as part of a technology roadmap agreed with suppliers. There are four main options for toolsets in a SIAM ecosystem. There could be one central toolset mandated by the customer for all parties to use. The service providers could each use their own toolsets and then integrate them with a service integrator's toolset. The service providers could each use their own toolsets, and the service integrator could be responsible for integration. Or finally, a separate integration service could be used to integrate the service provider and service integrator toolsets. No one option is preferable to the others. The option chosen will depend on the customer organization's requirements, what is already in place, budgets, timescales, available options, and many other factors. We're going to study challenges and practices for creating a tooling strategy. Click on each one to learn more. You can see the challenges associated with creating a tooling strategy here. Legacy tools are toolsets that are already in place. They may not offer the full set of functionality required to support the SIAM model. Lack of a clear architecture or a poorly defined scope also make the chance of selecting the right toolsets less likely. Data integration between systems using messaging engines, such as an enterprise service bus, is only possible with a comprehensive technical architecture. Service providers who won't use the required toolset or complete the required integration will also be a challenge. Toolset requirements should be addressed during contract negotiations. There are 5 practices associated with creating a tooling strategy. We're going to review each one. As we study, think about the toolsets that are in place in your own organization or your own experience. Have you seen any instances where a lack of data integration has affected service quality? Having a clear technology strategy is absolutely essential. The customer organization needs to clearly define its expectations and plans, as these will affect all the other parties in the SIAM layers. If the customer needs to meet any security or audit requirements, it must also share that information with the service integrator and service providers. Without a clear strategy, the service integrator could do their best, but still not fulfill requirements. Using industry standard integration methods will also make the definition and implementation of a tooling strategy more simple. One of the advantages of a SIAM model is the ability to easily add new service providers. Industry standard integration supports this, making it simple for a new service provider to integrate their toolsets. If non-standard integration methods are used, each new service provider will need to carry out expensive and time-consuming customization. The ownership of the toolsets and the data must also be agreed and documented. An example of where this can go wrong comes from a UK government department that used its supplier toolset for incident recording and knowledge base articles. When the contract with the supplier ended, the government department found it didn't own any of the data, so lost access to all of its historical information. The toolset should be under change control to protect it from the impact of changes, and have a continuity plan in place in case the toolset is unavailable for a long period of time. The tooling strategy needs to allow new service providers to onboard easily, as we mentioned earlier when looking at integration standards. As well as integration, it needs to be easy for a service provider to train its staff and configure any interfaces with its own tools. The tooling strategy also needs to address how access will be removed when a service provider leaves the SIAM model to protect the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of the data. Finally, adopting a common data dictionary is a recommended practice. This should be in place before the SIAM model is live because it drives consistency across all stakeholders and all of the SIAM layers. The data dictionary will apply to all the data fields being used, for example, incident categories, service reports, request for change statuses, and knowledge article versions. That completes Lesson 13 and our studies of SIAM practices. Remember, these are just examples based on the knowledge and experience of the authors of the SIAM Foundation body of knowledge. Each organization will build its own set of practices to help it work effectively in its environment, and the practices within each SIAM layer will be slightly different, although they should all be of benefit to the overall ecosystem. For example, the Common Data Dictionary will normally be defined by the service integrator, will help the service providers to interact with each other and the service integrator, and will help the customer organization to receive meaningful information about how services are performing. Click on the Next button to access your end-of-lesson quiz when you're ready. When you finish the quiz, click the Next button again to move on. We've studied practices related to measurement, technology, people, and processes. Coming up next in the course, we'll study the definition of a process and look at the common processes that support SIAM models.